So you're welcome to stay and listen to the South Inner. I'm not kicking anyone out. But at this time, I will ask if anyone is here from the South Inner, could you raise your hand just so I know who has joined us? Um, I don't see any hands. Is anyone here for the South Inner geography?
Yes, I am. I'm 28209. That's South Inner, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let me switch presentations and we will dive into an overview of the South Inner area plan. Um, so Ms. Sutton, thank you for joining us. May I ask if you have had a chance to look at the plans or um, preview them at all?
No, I've been on several of these sessions over the past 3 years or so, but I have no idea what you're talking about tonight. I don't know what the agenda is other than plan, but I don't know where it stands, why we're having it right now, and what you plan to cover.
Okay, I'm happy to walk you through that. So, on April 3rd, the city released 14 community area plans as the next step in planning for our growth. So, the first step was in 2021, we adopted the 2040 Comprehensive Plan, which sets out a vision that future growth should support and benefit as many people as possible. The way that we heard from the community to do that is to make sure future growth increases housing choices across the city, increases job opportunities across the city, access to daily goods and services like grocery stores and daycares, and then reduce environmental impacts. So, those four things are really important to ensuring future growth benefits as many people as possible. And once that citywide plan, which is that level one, was adopted, we did a mapping exercise across the city to support the plan, but we always knew this next level of guidance, number three, was going to be important for really realizing our vision. So, the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2021, the map was adopted in 2022, and now a few years later in 2025, we have that next level of guidance. So, this all works together and is aimed at accomplishing the same vision. It's just more detailed guidance. And at the core, the guidance within these plans is really about creating complete communities. So, creating places where you can live, work, and get your daily needs met in a connected way. So, you don't have to necessarily get in a car to go to the grocery store. Maybe you could walk or bike or take a bus ride. And these plans are a result of a four-phase process. We're currently in phase five, where we're reviewing it. We're reviewing with the community and asking council for consideration. What's important about this is that along the way, we've engaged the community and shared outcomes of the process. So we recognize that 14 plans at once is a lot, but we've tried to share pieces of the plans along the way so that people didn't feel overwhelmed at this point. We've also done a lot of engagement, like I said. You can see here the reach of our in-person meetings. We've also connected with a lot of people online, either through our website, our social media, and we've developed a lot of interactive tools over the last few years. So story maps, survey forms, that sort of thing. But ultimately, the 400,000 people reach both in person and online, and the 6,000 person reach in person resulted in 1,700 comments that helped shape these documents. You can see here the 14 documents cover the geographies shown. And what's important is that each plan is structured the same, so that you have the same chapters in each plan, but the unique analysis and findings of each plan is tailored to that geography. The goal is that these 14 plans together are going to help accommodate the 400,000 people that are coming over the next 20 years in a way that respects our neighborhoods, puts growth where our infrastructure can support it, and then creates vibrant mixed-use places across the city, which we believe helps increase access. So I'm going to walk through the South Inner has a green cover page, and this is the table of contents within it. I'm going to keep the table of contents up so you can kind of see how we're progressing through the document. The introduction really covers what I've shared, kind of what we're doing and why. And then we move into a profile where we talk about the number of growth that's expected to come, as well as just a snapshot of who lives there today. So the demographics of who lives in this geography and as compared to the city. And then we get into the meat of the plans, and this chapter called Community Needs and Goals talks about how this geography talks about this geography's current level of access to housing choices, access to job opportunities, daily goods and services, and current environmental impacts. Because remember, these are the important tenets of ensuring growth benefits everyone. And so in the South Inner geography, this geography actually has pretty good access to jobs and to daily goods and services. And it has less environmental impacts as compared to other parts of the city. So if you're focused on these four metrics, increasing housing choices is really the biggest priority for the South Inner geography. And as such, that means the 10 comprehensive plan goals would be prioritized. The housing goals would be a priority for this geography. Transit also bisects this geography, and so really meeting our transit-oriented development goal would be important, and retaining identity and charm. I'll mention goal five, which talks about transportation, I'll touch upon later. That's applicable everywhere. And then growing in a fiscally responsible way is also important. So after the needs and goals are identified for the geography, we then present a map which talks about the development pattern that's recommended for the future. So you can see a lot of this geography is yellow. This reflects the established single-family neighborhoods that are there. And this is an important thing for us to protect in the future. We've heard that from the community through every step of the way. So we recommend protecting that. And in order to accommodate the people who are moving here, we think we can do that in a lot of the transit-oriented development along the blue line, or in some of the mixed-use centers, like along East Boulevard, along Providence, and also the Community Activity Center at Park Road. So the pink and the blue colors denote a type of development that would have retail or office on the ground floor and then residential units above it. Or it could be townhome units with a commercial core. But the point is, these areas need to be more intense than the established neighborhoods, and also have a mixture of uses so that we can accommodate that growth and also provide access to the people who live within the centers, but also to the people living adjacent to the centers. So in general, this area, the majority of it's recommended to remain the same. So 78% should remain as is. And then 22%, primarily along the South Boulevard corridor and at other key locations, should evolve into a more mixed use type of development to meet our needs. After the map, there's language in the plan that talks about how these recommended changes address the needs. And this is an example, like some of the commercial along Providence Road. If it becomes more of a neighborhood center, this helps address needs and advances goals. Then the next chapter of the plan, called Supporting the Vision, is broken into several sections. The first is an acknowledgement called the Neighborhood Toolkit. There is a lot of great programs in the city that already help communities address their needs and improve, enhance and improve conditions. So while those programs exist and are great, it might be hard to find them, and it might be hard to connect the dots about how they apply to some of these development goals. And so what we did was we cataloged the programs based on access and impacts. And this is a reference that community groups can look at to see, if they care about increasing access to housing, what are some of the programs already out there today that could help you with that in your area? Then within the mobility section, this section states that creating safe and equitable mobility is important across the city. And then it references the Department of Transportation's streets map. So this is essentially a map that talks about the future cross section, very similar in importance to the policy map. So this is what should happen in the future. This map is just related to the cross sections. And so as development occurs, the colors on the map denote, what bike lane or what bike amenity should show up, what pedestrian sidewalk width should show up, that sort of thing. This chapter also summarizes our Department of Transportation's strategic investment area work. So since the comprehensive plan and our goal to change our mode shift, they have been dealing with the reality that we have a limited number of infrastructure dollars to meet all of our mobility aspirations. And so their analysis tells us where they plan to make investments that will return the biggest impact or the biggest benefit for the investment. And so we put all of this work that the Department of Transportation has already done, but within recent history, to show the community how land use and transportation all works together. Then the plans offer a new level of information. It's called a mobility assessment. And these assessments are supposed to be used both by private developers and the city. So in our mixed use areas, these are the areas that are going to grow and change the most, right? What you see in gray, this is primarily the neighborhoods. So within the areas that are going to change, we want to make sure that development projects help address inadequacies. So this table tells you where certain mixed use centers, how they're functioning in terms of mobility. We also have one for open space and community character. And the expectation is that a developer will look at this and say, okay, this area needs better pedestrian crossings. Let me include that in my project. And so as a community member, when you guys are reviewing development projects, you should reference this table and see if a petition or a proposal is helping to improve conditions. Similarly, city staff that is responsible for allocating program dollars, they should look at this table as well to decide where they spend their money. And then that third bucket is the strategic investment area that I mentioned. So there's three ways that mobility improvements can happen in your South Inner geography. I'm going to skip open space. It's similar, the contents is similar to this table in that we say the county has historically carried the responsibility of maintaining and expanding open space in our community. The reality is they can no longer do that on their own. The city and private development has to take a more active role in creating open spaces. And so we have an assessment where, again, in the areas of most change, we provide information about what is needed in hopes that future development incorporates those needs. We also have a section about environmental justice. So I mentioned the comprehensive plan talks about increasing access and decreasing impacts. So this chapter really takes that idea of decreasing impacts to the next level. What we do is we dive in and say, what explicitly are the environmental impacts in this geography? So is it a tree canopy issue, proximity to industrial or transportation infrastructure, et cetera? And these function like this in that it's a data point to inform future decision making. For example, this area has pretty bad tree canopy impact. And so you can see a lot of that's in the South End corridor where there's very urban development. And the heat impacts of that low tree canopy coverage and high impervious surface is significant. And so there's new policy language. I don't have it on the screen, but I can bring it up in the plan that talks about how we should start to prioritize city dollars to improve environmental impacts. In this case, it would be by prioritizing tree plantings in areas with high heat impacts or other mitigating efforts. In the last example that I just talked about, where there's manufacturing next to neighborhood one. So I believe the environmental justice section is a big step forward for the city in terms of policy guidance. And then the community character section, it also has an assessment like I showed here. And so this section is assessing the kind of placemaking elements that you see in our mixed use geographies. And then we also have some new policy guidance that helps advance goal number 9 from the comprehensive plan. Goal number 9 is to retain our identity and charm. And so there's some new policy guidance in these area plans that talk about prioritizing preservation and doing that by exploring tax incentives or zoning and permitting exceptions to help incentivize preservation more than we've seen it in the past. There's also some policy guidance that we need to better help protect our neighborhood character, use some regulatory tools like the neighborhood character overlay, which is in jeopardy right now because of state statute. But there are other tools like pattern books that could help influence the right type of infill. And so we're putting that out there as something the city needs to advance. And then also the city taking a more active role in creating vibrant centers, like gathering places, by activating some of their underutilized land or some of the right of way. So there's some new policy guidance that I wanted to point out there. And then I'll stop talking after this and open it up for discussion. These plans are 20-year documents, and so they will be put into action through a number of ways. The city has a role by evaluating future rezoning petitions in line with the policy guidance in these plans. We also have a role in how we make our capital investment dollars, or spend them. But then a lot of this is going to be dependent on private development. And when that development occurs, it would be subject to the guidance in these plans. Furthermore, the area plans level 3 is not the last level of planning. There are conditions that cannot be addressed in these bigger plans. And so we have another tool in our toolbox called specific plans. And we'll be rolling out soon kind of the options within that bucket and what are the criteria for those options. And so there are more tools available to our community as needed. And then finally, we will continuously update the comprehensive plan and these area plans so that we are not stagnant. We're responsive to changes as they come, and also responsive to the community as it changes. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and just open it up for discussion. We do have 40 minutes. If the conversation is not done, I want to let everyone know that council has delayed decision. And so we have more time to continue talking. We have office hours Tuesdays from 11 to 1, Thursdays from 3 to 5. And if that doesn't work for you, staff is happy to connect either in person or online at a time that works for you all. So with that, let me see if anyone has their hands up or anything I can address. Don't see any hands. Does anybody have a comment or something they'd like to say?
I actually do have a question. How, the policy sounds fine. How do you ensure that decisions are made in line with the policy? What's that process that ensures that oversight process that ensures that occurs?
Ways. Most immediately in the rezoning process, we will start to change our staff analysis to align with recommendations in this plan. So, for example, if a rezoning petition was proposing just apartments in a mixed-use center, we would reference parts of this plan and talk about how that petition may or may not be in line with our vision. So within a very short period of time, you'll start to see this guidance show up in the rezoning process. It is still a council decision. And so what we are able to do is just give more information about what should be the considerations for a decision to make sure we're advancing our vision. Longer term, we also are going to develop a road show and where we come out to community meetings and show them what their plan is and try to give them some ideas for how they can use it to advocate for themselves. So, for example, as a community leader, if staff could be telling a developer one thing from the plans, but if it's also coming from the community, that's now twice as impactful. And so we want communities to understand what's in here and how they can use them to their advantage. So we plan to do a road show. And then from a staff perspective, we're also holding trainings and coordinations to where the people who manage programmatic dollars in other departments are very aware of what these plans say and how these plans can and should influence their decision making. So we're kind of, all the decision makers are council, community, and staff. We're trying to educate on all fronts to ensure these plans are being used and put into action.
Okay, thank you. One of the just minuscule items is something that I heard about in one of the earlier uh, conversations about removing trees of a certain girth, diameter. Um, and I have seen that followed, and I've seen that really not followed. And so that goes against one of your policy areas, to keep, to keep the environment cooler. So how are they? That's why I'm wondering how these things work out when the developer comes before the planning department. The developers have a lot of sway, and it just seems like the fine is so minuscule that it's not enough to deter them from taking down a perfectly good tree.
Yes, you are right in that there is kind of a tension between development and growth and tree preservation. Um, the comprehensive plan and these supporting area plans try to balance both of that, in that we have to find a place for growth to happen, or else it's not going to happen in a way that serves us. So it does that. It says, here's the best places for growth to go in a way that advances as many goals as possible. But there are going to be trade-offs. And so where there are more urban parts of our community, there will be less tree canopy, and we have that tree canopy percentage kind of reflective of that. But there should still be street trees that provide shade, and there's still a minimum open space requirement in these areas, in these more urban areas. That those requirements were developed within the UDO as a reflection of the values from the 2040 plan. So we've taken our first attempt at connecting and balancing those needs through our policy and our regulations. We have heard since the comprehensive plan and the UDO have been adopted, that the tree save is not working as well as we wanted it to. And so there are ways that staff is continuing to monitor and update deficiencies. For example, we have a biannual text amendment process where if there's a regulation that needs to be fixed, that can be done in the Unified Development Ordinance. We also have our tree staff who's initiating a tree canopy action plan update next year based on lessons learned over the past few years. So we continue to monitor and kind of tweak and adjust both our policy and our regulation in response to what we're seeing. But I understand your point about the developers paying an in lieu fee, and um, my understanding is that it can't be too easy because we really do need tree save across the city. So that might be an area that they're taking a closer look at.
Thank you.
Mhm. Is there anyone else who has a? Oh, Sylvia.
Hey, Catherine, thanks so much. Just a couple of questions. So you said there are other aspects that are being developed, but developers will be using the plans once they're adopted by council. So when will it all be aligned? If there are still smaller things that are going to be developed, but then developers are able to go before council once adopted and say, here are the plans, when will all of that be aligned so that, we fully understand what is and is
So,
not allowed?
yeah, for the sake of everyone, I'm going to just pull up this screen again. So, Sylvia is using the word aligned, which is referring to an idea where we change the zoning on the ground to match the policy map. And that is not scheduled to happen. There, to my knowledge, there is not a definitive schedule. So this is a map. The policy map talks about the type of development that should happen, but it has no legal teeth or holding in that if you have a single family zoning entitlement right next to a transit station, you can build what your current zoning allows. Or in contrast, if you have a commercial zoning in an established neighborhood, even though we don't want that to happen long term, if you have those entitlements, you can build that today. So there is a disconnect between this policy map and our zoning map. In an ideal world, we would match those two, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of community support and political will. Unfortunately, we've gotten some recent legislation from the state that would limit that idea. And so, right now, my understanding is that that desire to align our policy and our regulations is on hold. If you were talking about the specific plans, Sylvia, oops, uh, where'd that go? So I talked about how there's another tool in our toolbox. Is that also what you were referring to?
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking. Not the
Oh,
line
okay.
zoning, but the other part. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry
The
about
other
that.
tools in the box. Yeah.
Um, ah, I've lost my mouse. Hold on, give me a minute. So the small plans or the specific plans, that is something that we are developing the criteria for now and would not happen immediately. So where is that screen? Here we go. Um, these specific plans is something that we would develop criteria for. Oh, I'm not sharing. I'm sorry. Are you seeing the kind of pyramid?
Mm, no, well, inverted, where it's
Okay, yeah,
comprehensive
inverted,
planning. Okay,
inverted.
yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so this level of planning, specific plans, this would not happen right away, but it is something that could be mobilized maybe 2026, 2027. We could undertake the first one or two. The thing is, though, those plans are really intended to address a specific condition or a unique circumstance. There is not a need for 300 of these across the city. These community plans at the larger geography really provide the modernized land use guidance, design guidance, mobility and open space guidance that we need to increase access and decrease impacts. So I don't want people to feel like they're left waiting for this level. It will be needed in some areas, but it is not expected to be needed everywhere. For example, a transit station area on the red line. That's a unique circumstance with a significant level of infrastructure that requires more detailed infrastructure planning. So that would be a scenario. I do think historic districts next to transit stations is a condition that's very unique and limited across Charlotte. That might be a scenario. There's also the scenario of we heard from Douglas Drive at the public hearing. That is a unique circumstance where neighborhoods are in the growth path of a huge airport. That's a unique circumstance. So I just share those kind of examples, not to be inclusive or um, there's other scenarios, but I just to give you an idea of what we intend them to be.
So, Catherine, another question is, council has delayed the decision based on what you said, not know that's what they were talking about on Monday night. So this is more so to Douglas. Douglas, does this mean that the planning committee is also going to be delaying your decision as well? That's one thing. And I think the second part of that is, and maybe this goes back to Catherine, do you all know yet whether council has said anything about whether they're going to be adopting all of the 14 plans together, or are they still looking at possibly separating out the adoption? And I think maybe both you, Catherine, and Douglas can kind of weigh in on those questions.
Um, Catherine, you may know a little bit more about this than I do. I did receive, we've gotten a tentative agenda for our meeting, for the planning committee meeting on Tuesday, and you are all invited to watch it online if you would like. There will be a discussion about the plans where we will take feedback from the commissioners. The planning committee, the way we attacked these plans, there are 7 members of the planning committee, and each member was given 2 geographies to do a detailed dive in. So we will have that discussion. I do not believe at this moment that we will be calling for a recommendation vote on Tuesday night. And the part that I heard about council said deferred, and it didn't give a date for when they were going to get around to putting it back on their agenda. We will have to make our recommendation before council can do their final vote. So I'll just say that part might be a little bit fluid. And Catherine, if I said something that is beyond correct, then I will hope you will correct me.
No, I mean, Sylvia, like the decision and the direction comes from council, right? So when they are comfortable, they'll give us the green light. What the expectation is at this time is that we continue to talk with the community and work with the community and demonstrate that we are being open and receptive. And so we're going to, like Douglas said, we'll share comments that we've heard so far and what we think our staff, what staff's response is and what we think we can do in order to be responsive. We'll kind of talk about the first pass of that on Tuesday, but then it's going to be up to executive leadership and council to decide when they're comfortable and ready to take this to the next step.
Thanks so much. One last question. So when we're looking at these comprehensive plans here and for each of the areas, tell me which aspects, again, can you just confirm which aspects of the plan are going to be adopted by council and which ones are not going to be adopted or pretty much there like for information's sake? So can you clarify that? And then secondly, could you tell us what a consistency or inconsistency statement will sound like once they are adopted?
Okay. You're still seeing my screen, right? You see the cover?
Yes. Yes.
Plan
Still
cover.
seeing it.
Okay.
Yes.
So what will be adopted is the introduction through supporting the vision. Okay. So every example that I shared tonight, your individual needs and goals, the policy map, our streets map and strategic investment areas, as well as these assessments. This is all now policy guidance that gets adopted and informs future decisions. What does not get adopted is the implementation section. And I'm going to go over to my web page here. The implementation section includes basically it's a staff table here that tells us what the recommendations are, who's supposed to take the lead, and what's the approximate timeline. This is basically a tracking document for us to stay on track with what we say we're going to do. So we don't need to adopt this because it needs to be flexible based on staff's capacity and such. Furthermore, the strategic investment area bundles of projects. So these maps that show you what the potential projects are in each area are also not supposed to be adopted because Department of Transportation needs the flexibility to pick impactful projects as certain conditions line up. Maybe they can't do the traffic signal because of dollars, but they can do the pedestrian crossing. The point is, this is the strategy of these points and lines will be adopted, and then how it actually gets executed, is up to CDOT over time with the dollars that they have. They may have more dollars with the 1% sales tax. They may not. So how they put this into action depends on certain things. So that's what's going to be adopted. With that in mind, let me share an example of how a consistency statement will be influenced by these plans. So remember, these are just policy, and so it just becomes considerations for council when they evaluate a request. The first thing a rezoning analysis will say is, what is the area's greatest needs? Second, is the rezoning petition consistent or inconsistent with this map recommendation? If it's inconsistent, we do have some new guidance in the program guide because we recognize the map cannot account for all scenarios. And so within the program guide, there's considerations for when something different can happen, but that something different is still in line with what we're trying to accomplish. Okay. So for example, we protected a lot of neighborhood 1 in the city of Charlotte. That is a high priority for us. We know some fringe neighborhood 1 sites next to certain places are likely to redevelop based on land value and people not, people's desires. So in certain situations, based on how big the site is, what's next to the site, and its proximity to other things, it may be appropriate for neighborhood 1 to go to neighborhood 2, but it shouldn't just happen in the middle of nowhere. And so this is a way for us to provide some flexibility, but also hold the line on what's really important, which is protecting like the core of established neighborhoods, and still allowing growth to happen based on market and infrastructure and other things. So long comment, I'm sorry. So we're going to, in the rezoning analysis, talk about the needs, talk about the map and any potential changes to the map. And then we would also reference these assessments and say whether or not the project helps improve needs as shown in the plan. I feel like I was a little long-winded there. Sorry, Sylvia.
That's okay. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thanks. Thanks, Catherine.
Okay. Sylvia, I see Ellen's hand up. Are you okay if I move along?
No. I just lowered my hand.
Thank you. All right. Hey, Ellen, how are you?
I'm good. I think I've unmuted myself. Excuse
Yes,
me.
we can hear you.
How are you?
Good, thank you.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. It's a lot, as you know. I am wondering, because I just heard you talking about, it sounded like city funding, and these are mobility projects, but it probably applies to all projects across the board. City funding, and then you said, okay, or a developer might, want to add something that's necessary to their rezoning, which we do have at least one developer who will do that. Most don't. But what about by right projects? Because then, one of the goals of the UDO was for us to get to the place where we're not doing rezonings. We're not haggling over rezoning. So how does this work, just going through straight land development, and where do these projects come into play?
That's a wonderful question. So yes, these plans, the way that they can influence direct development by right is that we assess the Unified Development Ordinance standards against this new level of guidance. Okay, so the example I'm going to pull from is our policy map talks about mixed use places and where that should happen. Any of the blue or pink, these are areas that should have a mixture of retail, office, residential. They should not be just multifamily apartments. Well, we've seen that is what's happening. And so we look to the UDO regulations, and there's no regulatory requirement for that mixture. And so we're seeing that this is a deficiency between our policy guidance and our regulation. And these plans call for us to study this further and to see if there's some way we can improve this in the future. So that's a current example of what's happening, how the policy guidance here is going to inform regulatory updates. But there will be other examples. I think you're familiar, they're rolling out a biannual text amendment process. So as issues like this occur, where we see development, by right development is not in line with our vision, we'll look to these plans to help tweak and refine the UDO. So you know that this is what I've just described does not happen overnight, and this is reflective of that living document comment that you hear all the time. I know a lot of people are frustrated with that, but this is what we can do, and this is kind of that iterative effort that planning has to go through in order to impact real change.
So we're thinking this is gonna happen by text amendments in the case of by right development?
Yes, yes.
And okay, interesting. And then the other thing I was thinking about, some of this can be implemented by CDOT, and then there's NCDOT. I mean, we run into conflicts there. So, or let's say Mecklenburg County, like land development, you're going to have county people weighing in on those projects. So that coordination,
Yeah.
how does that happen?
So CDOT, the Department of Transportation, Charlotte Department of Transportation, is really our liaison with NCDOT. And they have had great success in kind of balancing the state and the local priorities. NCDOT is all about moving cars as fast as they can across the state. Whereas we have a very different priority. We want to shift our mode share to 50-50. And so with every project, there's going to have to be some kind of compromise, but CDOT has done a really good job of explaining Charlotte's needs and priorities to NCDOT over the years and finding a way forward. So I can't speak to explicitly how it will happen, but I know that has and will continue to happen. With the county in terms of park and rec, well, let me say the county has been involved in this process. And if you go to the open space chapter, I know we're in the West Middle Plan, excuse me. I'm going to go down to the open space section. They have been a partner in this content, and it specifically says, the county has historically managed and expanded our open spaces, and they're going to continue to do that. The MEC playbook is very important, but the city and private developers have to have more of an active role going forward in creating new open spaces, specifically kind of hardscaped, more amenitized type spaces that you see in more urban settings. So this memorializes, there has to be an evolving role and way for meeting our needs. And they thought this was a pretty interesting concept to think about open space based on mixed use places. And they're going to take this assessment and make it a consideration in their future park planning and expansion as well. So there is coordination that is happening and will continue to happen.
All right, that's good to know. I mean, one thing for example, in Dilworth, we lack is mobility in terms of bike networks, and we have been trying to get that for some time. East Moorhead is an NCDOT road. They will not allow bike lanes. So I just wondered how, when that goes, strictly by right, who's negotiating that? So far, I haven't seen a lot of interaction. And I'm not going to ask as many questions.
That's a very great point, though. By right, coordination between local and state DOT is probably more difficult. I'm going to make that note.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm not asking as many questions as Sylvia did tonight. So I'm just going to say thank you. Appreciate
Really,
the
Ellen? That's what we're doing.
time.
Seriously.
Sylvia, how does it feel to be under that bus?
Douglas, really, I'm telling you, right? All over my back, right? Okay.
I couldn't help myself. Sorry.
Well, I'm just, since there's a moment here, I'm going to give us a time check. We have 10 minutes. There are several people that I haven't heard from, and so I want to give you a chance to ask a question or share a concern or comment if you'd like.
Hi, Catherine. It's Rosalind. I think I want to make sure I heard you correctly or get clarification about what you said if you did say it. So I think I heard you say that what is currently a place type as the city grows and accommodates the growth, what is a certain place type today may not be a place type in the future.
What I said is there is some flexibility for change. I'm such a visual person. I'm gonna go back to this map.
Sure, thank
This
you.
this map is what we want to have happen. And we think it's a very well-informed recommendation. We've done a lot of analysis to get here. But we recognize that we can't account for all scenarios. And there might be something that's proposed, in one area or another that doesn't match the colors on this map, i.e., the guidance in this map. And so in those scenarios, we have kind of this contingency plan. It's called Table 3 Minor Map Amendment Criteria, and it's in the program guide. I'm going to put it in the chat. This is a table that says if you're not going to do what the map says, you need to at least match up with these priorities so that we're continuing to be strategic about our growth. Does that make sense?
Yes. It makes sense. Doesn't necessarily make me feel secure as
Well,
the resident of Cherry. And
yeah, and
I worry
I
about
don't want to like
protections.
try to convince people or, my job is to share information.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I would offer is that the values that we have heard from the 2040 plan through the policy map and now through this area planning effort is very much baked into this contingency table. Okay, so we don't want manufacturing to go next to neighborhoods. You would see that here in the preferred adjacency column. We don't want neighborhoods we don't want um, little scatterings of townhomes and inappropriate development to be put just anywhere in established neighborhoods. There might be an appropriate place and condition, but it's strategic. And so that's what I just want to offer is that this contingency table has our values and our priorities baked into it. And so it's us trying to hold the line, but also offer some flexibility because we are only one variable in this land development game.
Thanks. I appreciate your trying to hold the line with us.
um, Anyone else?
Ellen has another question.
Well, I don't see Ellen's hand up, but I do see
No,
Kiva's hand
look
up.
in the chat box.
Oh. So Ellen, and also be kind, y'all. It's not technically a contingency table. Sometimes when I get chatting, I get a little loose or a little more layman in my language. It is a minor map amendment criteria table, and the link is just above Ellen. If you, let's say it's the link above, and it is page 38. I'll put that in here. And Kiva, do you want to go?
Yes, thank you. I'll try to be quick. Thank you. Hello again. Is there a definition of specific plan somewhere online?
No, we are developing that. We have a internal workshop scheduled early June.
Okay. And when you addressed Ms. Sutton, I think it was, regarding what's it going to look like after adoption, you mentioned that staff recommendation would identify how rezonings align with community plans. There used to be this goals checklist type table we used to have. It was some kind of doohickey that we included in every final staff analysis that went to council. Will there be some version of that coming back or something similar for area plans? Because when you mentioned the final staff analysis, it jogged my memory. And I remember that it highlighted everything good about a particular rezoning, but it didn't highlight a potential miss of
Yes.
did not highlight a potential negative impact of a particular rezoning. And I'm wondering if there might be a change in that. Council depends on it in their decision making, and they don't always know when something is missed. They don't always know when there's a negative impact. And sometimes, hindsight is 2020 is not an acceptable excuse when it goes to impacting neighborhoods. So EJ impacts, for instance, because that's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, so you're right. That goal checklist was what we had available at the time. And it's better that we used it than not, but it didn't have enough clarity, enough specificity so that we were consistently saying when goal 3 was applicable or consistently applying goal number, whatever, 8, right? Like it was kind of a decision made on a case by case basis about which goals were advanced. And then to your point, it didn't consistently document the shortcomings or the drawbacks. So these plan documents offer that missing guidance to where we can be very consistent in saying goal number 2 should be applicable in areas where there is a need. Or more clearly, if you want to use goal 2 and 3 as a rationale, council needs to also know whether or not that's the biggest priority for geography.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to offer more details, more data points, and doing that consistently across the 100+ rezoning petitions every year helps us be more consistent with our vision.
Understood. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we have 5 minutes left. Is there one last burning question, or did I mention the other opportunities for engagement? We have office hours Tuesdays from 11 to 1 and Thursdays from 3 to 5. If you want to continue talking with us, we're also happy to meet communities. If you have a meeting, we can join you either in person or online. And then we can also just do something one-on-one as your schedule permits. So let me drop this back in the chat. If you'd like to request more discussions, please email us at charlottefuture2040 and we will respond. Oh, Ellen, hey.
Okay, sorry, this will be very quick. We have been providing feedback online, and so I believe I heard at council business meeting that we will get some kind of document, or I know they will, but we would also like to see it, showing the responses to the questions. I mean, so far we haven't really seen much at all, actually, when we commented on the map. And in fact, we submitted a list of questions that you may be aware of. So what is the date? When will we see responses to our comments?
Yeah, so next Tuesday, that's May 20th, we will be presenting kind of what we have so far to the Planning Commission. And your comments, Dilworth's comments are in there. And so you'll see a summarized version of your comment. That's kind of, we get some that are all over the place or not referencing something, but you wouldn't know it by the language that's included. So we have a summarized comment so everybody understands the full nature of it. Then we have a staff response. And then if there's some action that we think we can take to be responsive, that'll show up in the last column. So we don't have everything responded to at this time, but we have a significant amount responded to, and we'll start to share that at Tuesday's planning committee meeting. And then after Tuesday, it'll be on our project website. So you're seeing the main page here. I suspect it'll live somewhere here, kind of under the main buttons. But once those are on the website, if you want to connect with us and we can kind of go over our responses one-to-one, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's good, because once we see those comments, that'll probably, create additional questions. So
Sure.
I'm glad there's a time delay on this process.
Yep.
Thanks.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. I know this is a lot to digest, so thank you for your patience with us. And we continue to be available if you have more questions or want to reach out, we're here. So thank you all for tonight.
Thanks for your patience with us as well, Catherine.
We are here to serve. Thank you very
Thanks.
much for
Bye-bye.
saying that. All right. Have a good night, everyone.